looking at himself thinking, this is warped, this is out of control.
The bill for playing at all costs came later in February, when Favre underwent what was supposed to be routine ankle surgery.
He's in the hospital. Deanna's up there visiting him, and she looks over at him. Next thing she knows, his eyes are rolling the back of his head. Brittany was there. She got scared. So what's wrong with Dad? And she screamed, and they took her out of the room, and they weren't sure if the seizures were caused from the painkillers or from a bad reaction to the anesthesia. But I think that's what you want to say scared Brett straight.
Brett Favre, who led the Packers into the NFC Championship for the first time in 28 years, has entered the NFL substance abuse program because of dependency on painkillers.
Voluntarily, I'm going to admit him to a in-treatment facility for however long it takes to get better. My objective is to get better so I can continue to play at a level that I have and to get to a Super Bowl.
This ESPN Classic program is presented by Circuit City. We know how you feel. That's why we're here. Circuit City, we're with you.
And Brett Favre, quarterback, Southern Mississippi.
I think the mindset was, here are the Atlanta Falcons, what are they doing? Jerry Glanville thought that this guy was a bust, that this was a guy that was never going to make it, this was a guy who was just a screw-up out there, and that the sooner you get rid of this guy, the better.
A lot of people don't believe I played with Atlanta because the team picture that I have, I'm not in it. Went out the night before. As I pulled up, they were coming off the field. I said, Coach, I had a car wreck, or I said they had a train wreck or something like that, and got caught it. Of course, I hadn't brushed my teeth, hadn't combed my hair, my eyes were red, probably stunk. And he said, son, you are a train wreck.
Brett Favre partied harder than he played in Atlanta, and when he did get to take a rare snap or two, he did nothing to distinguish himself. But in Green Bay, he was seen as salvageable.
He was rotting on the bench over there in Atlanta and going nowhere fast. And we traded a #1 pick for this Brett Favre guy. I watched a few clips of him playing. I think he had 5 throws that year with Atlanta. 2 interceptions for touchdowns.
When we made the trade for Atlanta, we did not put any provisions in there for reporting past the physical, and he reported to Green Bay and failed the physical. And I told the doctors to go back downstairs and pass him on the physical.
And he was just this wild and crazy kid from Southern Mississippi, but tough as nails.
Brett doesn't like to dress up. I guess he gets that from me a lot, just those shorts, flip-flops, T-shirt. One time Mike had probably talked to Brett and said, would it be all right, Brett, let me ask you to try to dress up a little neat? And he said, no, I ain't gonna do it. He said, why not? He said, that's not me.
He was born to 2 high school teachers on October 10th, 1969, christened Brett Lorenzo Favre, and grew up in a family of 6 in a Mississippi bayou. It was called The Kill. As far as the Favres were concerned, it was Eden.
There was no neighborhood. There was no street light. You know, the nearest friend or relative or next door neighbor was several miles away. We didn't even have a paved road.
It's different back there, a different way of life, and you know, we used to go down there for Mardi Gras, and I would tell them, I say, all you eat down there for weeks straight is crawfish and crabs. I'm like, don't you people have any hamburgers out here or anything?
He was a country boy, and sure, we grew up in the country, but I think the media took it to a different level. I've seen some of his sports cards with a raccoon hat, you know, like Davy Crockett.
I think he's got a little Larry Bird in him that way. You know, I know I've heard the stories about Larry Bird giving you a little Mark Twain, gosh golly, but then you get on the field and they want to kill you.
I think there's a lot of Peter Pan in the guy, Huck Finn. He cultivates being a little boy and still does that.
It was very, very cold in Green Bay, and it was a crucial situation, and I called a timeout. He came over, and I said, hey, I got a couple plays. He just kind of looked at me, and I said, come on now, you focus in now. Which one of these plays do you like? And he didn't say anything. He just kind of gave me this kind of goofy look. And I may have even grabbed his shirt, and I said, no, are you paying attention to me? And he goes, Mike, you ought to see your mustache.
In high school, he was known more for hijinks than for his football skills. He caught the attention of only one Division I school, Southern Mississippi, which was virtually in his backyard.
Brett wasn't recruited as a quarterback. He was recruited as a defensive back. And it just happened that in college, after about 2 or 3 days, they happened to see Brett just kind of throwing around, and Jim Carmody was the head coach at Southern Miss, and he says, who is that boy out there?
Favre was just a face in the crowd his freshman season in 1987 until he got his chance off the bench against Tulane. He responded with perhaps the most impressive spiral ever delivered by a monumentally hungover collegian.
We had gone the night before, and we figured we'd get us some beer for that night, and we got a case and a half of beer. We figured that's 18 apiece. We get out there the next day, and I look over there during warm-ups. Brett's not even throwing the ball. His uniform is just soaked with sweat. He's bent over between the benches and the wall, just throwing his guts up, sick as a dog.
People are like, how do you pronounce this kid's last name? And the first snap, he takes the ball, takes the 3-step and throws it 70 yards. And out throws his receiver probably about 10 yards. But the entire stand gives up and gives a standing ovation. And by the end of the game, they knew how to pronounce that name.
In July of 1990, just before his senior season, the quarterback who was being promoted for the Heisman nearly lost his life on a Mississippi back road.
I was following Brett in my car. I guess the gravel, it slid when it caught the pavement. It just spun him across the other side of the road. And when he did, his car flipped up in the air and landed against a pine tree.
Favre lost 30 inches worth of intestine and 40 pounds. Yet when Southern Mississippi played Alabama the second Saturday of September, there he was, calling the signals. The team rallied around him and pulled off the upset.
This
adjustable bed costs no more than many quality flatbeds. And when you buy selected ones with optional heat and built-in massage, you get this fabulous bonus. A 25-inch color TV absolutely free. In a Craftmatic bed, you adjust yourself into comfortable positions automatically. Call toll-free so we can mail you our adjustable bed catalog and a certificate for a free 25-inch color TV with bed purchase.
Call toll-free 1-800-249-1600.
Sometimes you have to suck it up for the team, and Brett has done that time and time again. I remember plenty of games that I went out there and I'd come in at halftime and I'd get a nice shot and be able to go back out there. I can remember one time I couldn't even walk, couldn't even move, and I went in, you know, of course you got to do what you got to do, and I went out there and I felt like Michael Jackson.
It looks like Favre is holding that left shoulder of his.
If you send him out there and you give him something to get through the game, then don't tell him at 2 o'clock in the morning you can't help him. They all have medical morality, but none between 1 and 7 on Sundays.
I said, I am ashamed as a journalist that I didn't know. He says, Peter, he said, nobody knew. Favre had his little stashes. You know, he was like any addict at the time.
I had to have them. And it got to a point where I used them for pain at first. Then I started using them just for recreational enjoyment. Hell, I'm playing great, you know. What's the big deal if I'm not sleeping at night?
6 years after the near-fatal car accident that introduced him to those magic pills, Brett Favre thought he had finally kicked one addiction, only to discover that he had traded it in for an old familiar vice.
He was on my television show, and he wanted to play Valhalla, which we got a great golf course. And he said, you think we can get some Bloody Marys? I said, yeah, I can get some Bloody Marys. So on the backside, he said, you know, it's getting a little bit warm. Can you think we can get a few beers? And then we went to a restaurant a friend of mine owned, and we were sitting there, and we had a couple glasses of wine and a couple bottles of wine, in fact. So now the show starts at 7:30. And right away, I said, Brett, let's talk about the ultimatum out of the NFL. You're going to stop doing this, stop doing that, and no more drinking. And what do you got to say? He said, Paul, looked right into the camera. I haven't had a drink for 6 months.
In this area, it's always a party. There's festivals. Every weekend there's something going on. And so there's always drinking, and you know, we did our share of having parties and drinking in front of the kids. And I really regret it.
Somehow, he willed himself through a second straight MVP season in 1996 without the painkillers. He looked, at least, like a reformed man.
I had to live up to that, but I was ready for the challenge. Knowing that I couldn't take pain medication, I remember getting my wisdom teeth taken out and didn't use any pain medication. They cut 4 teeth out, and the doctor says, "All right, we're going to give you some pain." I said, "No, I can't take none." They said, "You must be crazy."
Favre led the Packers into the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots in New Orleans. And in the town that Care forgot, a certain quarterback found himself surrounded by familiar temptations.
I remember being on Bourbon Street in the French Quarter during the week leading up to the Super Bowl and seeing Brett up on a veranda at one of the bars down there and thinking, I wonder what's in that cup.
I felt like at times that some of the people that was hanging around Brett were just hanging on his coattail because he was Brett Favre, and they were having a bad influence on him.
When he came back from the drug rehabilitation, I definitely think he had a chip on his shoulder. What he basically told people was, if you don't think I can come back, bet against me. It's one of his great assets is his confidence in his ability.
Back goes Brett to throw. Here they come. He's got time. He's throwing it downfield. He's got it wide open. It is going to be a touchdown to Andre Rison. Rison takes it across the...
After he threw both of those touchdown strikes, him just running around the field with his helmet off and his hand in the air, just ecstatic. You know, forget the MVP honors and all that stuff. This is the Super Bowl, and we're here. I'm here.
The Packers beat the Patriots 35-21. The next season, Favre became the first to win the 3rd Associated Press MVP award. Although Green Bay was upset by Denver in Super Bowl 32, Favre's burgeoning celebrity extended to late-night television, where he imitated the swagger of the quarterback who beat him, John Elway.
Can you do the walk for me? I'm curious.
I can do it.
Can you give me a... Here we go, here we go.
Favre threw 23 interceptions in the 1998 regular season, and in the playoffs, the Packers lost a wild-card game. At home, trouble began to fester. He had married his childhood sweetheart, Deanna, in July of 1996, and by 1999, her tolerance of his ruinous lifestyle had run out. She delivered an ultimatum.
I was still drinking and was not the husband, was not the father that I needed to be. And I was getting older too, and it wasn't as much fun. If I quit drinking, what'd I do? I was scared of that. She said, either you quit or we're gone. And I said, okay, I'm gonna quit.
99, Brett went through amazing changes. I mean, life changes. Brett and I were talking after minicamp practice. I said, you look thin, like you lost even some more weight. He said, well, I quit drinking. He said, I just decided alcohol has never done anything good for me or my family, and I'm probably best off without it.
Green Bay was good for him, in particular for some of the things that he was going through. If he was in a bigger city, Brett might have broke down. He was in a smaller city that was a little bit more patient with him. I don't know if that would have happened in the bigger city.
He has matured over the years, there's no question about that. He looks at things differently. I think he sees the potential for his own legacy in this game. He'll never admit that.
He apparently entered the 1999 season without pills or alcohol to lean on. He also was without his mentor, Coach Mike Holmgren, who had moved to Seattle. The pressure piled up, but the reformed Favre wouldn't retreat to the comfort of the old crutches.
99 was an enormously emotional season for him. If you recall his comeback that he led against the Raiders from down 14 points in the 4th quarter, when he left the field, he was in tears.
He knew something was going on, and no one knew what it was. I'm guessing some of it had to do with this is when he was just starting to get his life together, and the team didn't have a very good year, but you could see the guy mature during that time, not as a football player, but as a man.
Sorry, fellas.
Geico's always been about savings, but he really brought customer service to it.
It was a long-distance throw, and you had to throw it in this little square. And Brett, you know, he missed it the first time, but he threw it like 85 yards. So we just keep throwing balls, and he's turning and firing it and turning and firing. He threw about 12 in a row, and they were all over 80 yards, but none of them were in the little box, so none of it counted.
When he walks, it looks like the Old West, because he kind of carries it out to the side like John Wayne or the Duke would carry, you know, his arm as he's about to get into a quick draw match. I've been on the receiving end of a couple of those fastballs. It whistles past you when it goes. I have the dislocated fingers to prove it.
Other legendary arms cooled or grew old or retired. But in the decade of the 90s, Favre's 235 touchdown passes exceeded everyone's, from Marino to Young, Aikman to Elway.
If there's anybody that I could compare my playing style to, would probably closest compared to Brett, and because of the fact that we would do anything to win. It wasn't always pretty, and a lot of times we made dumb mistakes.
He makes some beautiful football plays. He makes some exquisite football plays out of reckless craziness, and he's car wreck and he's classic at the same time.
In 2001, Favre became the first player in NFL history with 10 consecutive 3,000-yard seasons, passing a mark he shared with Dan Marino.
He'll throw sideways, he'll throw underhand, he'll throw overhand. He will attempt to get the ball in places and succeeds often where you say that can't get the ball there. He is as good a playmaker as we've seen in this generation.
He's the salt of the earth, and that hasn't left him. No matter how high he's got. And I think people recognize that, he had a shaky start to begin with in his NFL career. And he believed in himself, like a lot of people in Kill believe in themselves. He embodies the spirit of Kill, Mississippi.
He's done movies, he's done national commercials, met a bunch of people. In a football sense, he's movie star famous. So I asked him, hey, out of all these things and all the people you've met, was there one thing you thought, hey, that was pretty cool? Or would you just rather be golfing or fishing or hunting, that kind of thing? I'd rather be hunting or fishing or golfing.
Playing in his second NFL decade, he continues to amass imposing numbers. But it's his transformation into a football statesman that most defines Brett Favre. When Randy Moss, the Vikings' luminous wide receiver, confessed that he doesn't go all out on every down, it was Favre who said that no such attitude will be permitted in his huddle. And so has the quarterback from the Bayou come full circle, from party-hardy irresponsibility to venerated tribal elder. For Sports Century, I'm Chris Fowler.